I'm Jonathan Greene, and you're listening to Sweet Success.
You've just checked in to Sweet Success. Join me, Katie Cline, for exclusive conversations with hotel executives, hospitality leaders, and industry innovators. Together, we'll uncover the strategies and techniques these masters of hospitality relentlessly refine. Whether you're already in the industry or just starting out, tune in every week to unlock the secret to your sweet success. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Sweet Success. I'm your host, Katie Cline, and today I'm delighted to welcome a fellow podcast host to the show, Jonathan Greene. Jonathan's show is called Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing, and it's one of the fastest growing real estate podcasts in the world. Check out his interviews, and you just might hear the very familiar voice of yours truly. In addition to hosting his podcast, he's also a luxury real estate agent and a lifelong real estate investor. So buckle up for some incredible pearls of wisdom. Prior to focusing solely on real estate, Jonathan worked as an attorney, a gallerist, a museum curator, and an educator. So much life experience in that sentence alone. I'm excited to dive in. Jonathan, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
So take us back and tell us how you first got started in real estate. I know we said lifelong real estate investor, but how did your whole journey begin?
Yeah, I'm not an exaggerator, so that really is the truth. I think probably at 2 years old, I was walking properties with my dad, and that continued all the way up until I was a teenager. And then after that, as I learned things, but being that it was the 70s, things were different. There was no internet. And I came from parents who got divorced when I was 2. So my dad would pick me up on the weekends. And so all we would do was hang out together. So at that time, it didn't really matter to me what we were doing. It just seemed that a lot of that stuff was real estate or real estate adjacent. And he was just a very good teacher of money, finance, life. And so we were driving from, I grew up in Brooklyn Heights. He would pick me up in Brooklyn Heights and we go to Westchester. And the hour there and the hour when we come home on Sunday was just all talking about real estate, finance, life. And then he's smart. He mixed in things like he'd just read from a dirty joke book. He just knew how to get information into my head through osmosis. And later I realized, wow, okay, I know a lot.
So he, I assume, was a real estate investor.
He was an attorney like I was, but he wasn't a trial attorney. He did wills and estates. So he was involved in the exchange of real estate at the end of people's lives. And I think, part of that and part of his prior history working as an attorney for the IRS kind of put property in his mind. And yet he started buying, and I unfortunately, he died when I was 33, 20 years ago. So I don't know how he started to invest in real estate. I'm trying to piece it together from some relatives, but yeah, he was literally just buying things at foreclosure. We would go to courthouse auctions. He would buy random pieces of land, strip malls in Florida. He just liked a good deal, but he knew what he was doing with the assets and how to manage them. And then over time, he accumulated a lot of rental properties. And that was really my first experience with hospitality, because I know this is really a hospitality-based podcast. And meeting tenants at a young age and understanding what the landlord-tenant relationship really bridged my way to understand how I would do it when I got older.
First of all, I'm so sorry to hear about his passing. And I couldn't agree with you more in terms of we don't think of the questions that we want to ask our parents or our loved ones until oftentimes it's too late, or really even see our parents as people who had these full lives before we entered the universe. So yeah. I have similar regrets and thoughts of things I wish I asked mine along the way too. But what I find so interesting about your story is something I don't think we think enough about is how much exposure can really shape us, even if it's just to show you something is possible. And that is a beautiful segue into your background as an attorney. So walk us back. You've obviously been around real estate your whole life, but did you not see that as like your first career, or is real estate what made you want to become an attorney? How did the law play into this?
Well, I was always doing real estate. I owned a lot of properties before I was 18 in trust because my dad was really smart with how he set up trusts for my sister and
Wow.
I. So I walked properties that I owned. I talked to tenants that I owned part of the property. I think back then I graduated high school in 1989. At the time, there wasn't really that much out there. There wasn't this like work-life balance shift or other opportunities. So I just assumed I would go to college. And then I actually went to college thinking I was going to be a basketball star. And I went to play at a Division III school, and I thought I'll definitely be the best player. And I showed up there, and every player was the best player on their high school team. And so that I basically flunked out of my first college, which was a business school. And I ended up transferring to another college, and that's where everything changed. I went into liberal arts, and it was just very open, and I was taking sociology and criminal justice and all these classes. And, at that school, I got straight A's, and I just was into criminal justice. That was my major. And I wanted to go to law school. I didn't want to do what my dad went, but I liked the idea of being a lawyer. And I don't think I thought of it at the time, but I know it was in the back of my head from watching my dad that getting the education in law school and going and becoming a lawyer and doing that business was going to help me no matter what I decided to do later on.
It's interesting you talk about work-life balance, and listeners, he said shift, just in case you misheard that. But I do think the younger generation today is maybe savvier almost than we were when we were that age, or at least than I was when I was that age. And I take you out of that because you were doing something at the time that wasn't called side hustle, but was essentially side hustle, right? You were pursuing your career in the law, but you were still obviously investing in real estate and having avenues there. And I was just in a coffee shop recently and heard a Gen Z conversation between a girl and the barista. And the barista said to the girl, "Oh, what do you do?" And she said, "Oh, I do this, but really on the side, I do this." And she said to the barista, "What about you?" And he said, "Oh, I work here and I work in a PR agency, but like really on the side, I do music." And I do think there is this interesting shift happening, as you said, where people aren't just necessarily thinking, I am only my job, and kind of keeping that alive at the same time. So did you almost see going into law as like an ability to fund real estate, or you were just kind of like, I do both?
Yeah, I always did both. I mean, if people asked my dad what he did, he said he was an attorney. If people asked me what I did, I said I was an attorney. I wasn't telling anyone that I invested in real estate, but I had a lot of properties. I was doing flips and things from the time I was on my own. I started buying houses on my own when I got to law school. So it wasn't as open to say. I never said I had a side hustle, but I did. But you could tell from my background when you read it out that I get bored quickly. I like to do a lot of things. So just because I was an attorney, I never was only going to be an attorney, even though I worked for the government for 8 years. So I'm working, 80, 90-hour weeks. I was really into it and I was really good at it. So I wasn't collecting rental properties at the time. My dad was still alive then. So it was more me being involved with a lot of properties that he owned, that I owned parts of, and managing that. And then I just kind of started to figure it out on the way. As I started buying houses myself, that's when I really learned how much I knew through my dad, through osmosis, like you were saying before, just the exposure element. I realized after I kind of, quote, flipped my first house, which wasn't really a flip, it was more like a lipstick flip. I just realized, oh my gosh, like this is all the stuff that he taught me. And then we were able, to talk about it for 10 years before he passed away, and me do a lot of transactions, which generally what I did was just buy houses that I lived in. And then I would either flip them when I moved in while I was living there or when I left. And I would make a lot of money. And I was like, this isn't that hard. I'm a very good home buyer. I know how to buy. I understand markets. I know that I don't need to, I know not to buy the best house, on the worst block. I don't want to buy the worst house on the best block either, because I don't want to do that much work at that time. I'd started doing that later, but I just want to be in an area that I know is going to grow, that hasn't popped yet.
This is a large reason that I wanted to have you on the show, because I think when you talk about real estate investing, especially in those terms, to many people who haven't had the exposure that you had growing up, it's like, oh, that's for people with more knowledge than me, or more money than me, or more experience than me. But what you just said there is really interesting. Of course, you had the exposure, you saw it firsthand from your dad, but do you think this is something anyone can do, or what is the profile of the person who should be thinking about real estate investing in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah, I love that question. So, I mean, I was very fortunate. My dad came from nothing. His dad was an alcoholic gambler who he would get my dad a new Mustang and then it would disappear by repo then the next day. But so my dad built this all himself. So someone had said once in some forum or after I was on a show, oh, trust fund, baby. I'm like, there's a difference. I mean, I did have a trust fund, but I didn't have a Rockefeller trust fund. My dad built me this from scratch. So I kind of took over that. Anybody could be invested in real estate, but the lore that's out there from the gurus and all ends of it, and this will go to the hospitality aspect, is you can do real estate without money, but boy, is it going to be a lot harder. So your best idea is to work as hard as you can at the job that you're trained to do, make as much money as you can, and stay there as long as possible. And then even when you have made equaled your income to that, stay another 2 years. And then you'll really be in good shape. And you'll do what I did. I was working 80, 90 hours weeks, but I was still doing real estate because I have other interests besides work. The thing that people need to focus on is they can't look for the quick hacks and the tricks to do it. Real estate is a long game. And that's why you don't go in kind of crazy about it and spend your last $1,000 to try to get in, because you could lose it and then you may quit.
The quick hacks, I think, are a symptom maybe of the kind of social media TikTok world that we're in, the influencers like you're talking about. And what I found so accurate about your story is, like you said, you were doing it on the side, but it was never like your career at the time. And I think maybe that's the issue, is so often we hear about people who are like, I'm going to become a full-time real estate investor. And you're like, how many deals have you done? And they're like, 0. I'm going to quit my job so I can focus on real estate. It's like,
every day.
None of us would do that with any other job. So why are you going to do that?
Well, think of it this way. I mean, everybody talks about, financially independent, retire early. What are you retiring from? I'm not retiring. I'm on time freedom now. But I'm on time freedom because I work hard. But I'm working. What else am I going to do? I like watching TV too, but that doesn't make me money. So when I look at it, I think that the funny thing is though, if you go all the way back to my dad's era and my era, there was real estate stuff on tape, Carlton sheets, things like that. It just there wasn't as much volume that it could get out there. So you would go to a seminar. I mean, think about timeshares. We talked about this and it plays a lot into hospitality. So when I was younger, my dad, we only stayed in timeshares or short-term rentals. I mean, this is in the 70s and 80s when people think, oh, short-term rentals didn't exist. Yeah, yes, they did. I've been going to them my whole life. We would go to Sanibel Island, we would go to Jupiter in Florida, and you would go to the local real estate agent and they would have a little grouping of short-term rental properties. And this is how investors were investing back then. So I understood that this was a different mode of doing real estate. And I was able to see it from then. So then as I transferred later, I understood what the business was about instead of just thinking it, that it was so insular or so just one note. But people have been doing this. Not much has actually changed in real estate. Social media has just made it more widespread, which gets more people looking for, that's why everyone's looking for a life hack, or a biohack or something, instead of just doing steady compound interest things that will get you much farther.
Ready to future-proof your business? The Future Laboratory's consumer foresight and trends intelligence platform, LSN Global, just got smarter. Introducing Ember, a new generative AI tool. Ember transforms LSN Global into your personal foresight research team. Faster, smarter, and more powerful than ever before. LSN Global connects you with the trends, data, and insights shaping tomorrow's business landscape. And now, with AI-enhanced research, it's your trusted intelligence partner. Head to lsnglobal.com/membership to book a demo or become a member today and try the beta version of Ember. Research has never been this seamless. Exactly. And it needs like the kind of scintillating headline to capture attention as opposed to just being like, come to this seminar and learn the 17-step process or whatever it was. I want to go back to like your career as an attorney and like getting to today and ask you
Yeah.
more about real estate and trends and whatnot. But you touched on something there about time freedom, which I think is so much what people are interested in these days. That is the true luxury of being able to decide what you do with your time and when you do with it. And before we started recording, you shared a little tidbit with me that you consider yourself quite an expert on time blocking. And I understand these are not the same things, but if you had to give us, the kind of high level spiel of how to be an expert time blocker, and if you do think that that eventually leads to time freedom, I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
They're definitely related. I'm very regimented anyway. I fall on the beginning part of the spectrum. I'm like very in on stuff. And so I always have been pretty scheduled. But as I got to points where I was running businesses or multiple things going on, I had to get myself more organized to make sure that I would get everything right. When I was an attorney, it was pretty simple. I wake up at 4, get to the office at 5, and I go home at 9 every day. And on the weekends, I would sometimes be on call 24/7 for things that happen. And, sometimes I'd have the weekend off. But that's not how I didn't need to have a schedule telling me what to do. I knew where I had to be. I go to court and then I come back. So as I, went into these other careers that were more independent and running my own businesses, I had to keep myself on track. So, I have a pretty strict regimen. The way that I tell people to do it is really in 3 parts. And this is, people think it's, I'll never forget these things. The first thing you do is take everything that is on a schedule. So if you have kids and they go to school, the first thing you do to start every school year is you put all the half days and days off on a calendar, because every parent knows you go take your kid to school and then you're like, it's a day off today. And it wasn't in my schedule. I didn't know. They didn't know. They're 7.
Yeah.
So you do that. And then you put all of your recurring things, like whatever it is, therapy, exercise, anything that you're going to do. If you have an appointment, you put all of those on. And then you put the aspirational things on there that you want to do. And that creates a rhythm to the madness, because if you do it on Google Calendar, you can just move it. You don't have to delete it. So if I have the gym on my schedule every day from 7 to 9, I almost never go at 7, but I take the block and move it to where I want the night before as I'm planning it out, and I see my whole week. And I have a very detailed color coding system. But the way that this applies to time freedom is it's helped me manage my open blocks. So I don't let anybody take my time away from me. I don't talk on the phone. I haven't answered my phone in 8 years, and people don't know how you could not do business. And I say, well, if you ask a business person, why would they take a call while they're doing their job? I'm not taking a call. You don't know if I'm busy, so why are you calling me? You should text me or email me and see when we can get on a call. So I do scheduled calls, but as we were talking about before we started recording, those are always on Zoom for me, because I'm better face to face. If I'm on a telephone, I'm pretty tuned out. I'll just be on my computer doing something else, and then I won't be paying the attention that I should. So as I figured, as you go to independent businesses, and especially if you want to get involved in real estate investing, especially if there are people who want to get out of a 9 to 5, then you have no schedule all of a sudden. So you're going to be unproductive. You may do well for a week. After that, you're going to be a disaster.
I know I'm jumping ahead to your current career, but you are currently a luxury real estate agent. So I am just blown away that you haven't answered a phone call, because I think, at least the way television portrays real estate agents, it's like, deal makers always on the phone. But I guess to your point, a lot of that is like, you want to make sure you're vetting the people who you're talking to, particularly because you are specialized in luxury real estate.
Yeah, well, so my message says, I'm never going to answer my phone. Send me a text. I'll respond right away. My friends and my old team used to call me the number 1 texter in the world, because I will text right back. And this goes to what we were talking about on my podcast with you about response time for short-term rentals. But I'll get back to them. But I also go ahead, which again goes to short-term rentals. I've set the table for people. So when I put up a listing of a luxury property, everything's there. All the documents are uploaded. It says what to do for everything. There's nothing missing. There's no reason to call me. So the people who call me just aren't reading the instructions that I've spent all the time to do. So I already know it's a problem. Number 2 is, what I learned as an attorney is everything should be documented. And anything that's not documented didn't happen. So the majority of the time when someone wants to have a conversation with me. Say I have a luxury listing, it's $2 million, and someone says, "Hey, can I talk to you? My clients like it, but I want to talk to you first." I just know that means they're going to lowball me. I don't need to have
Right.
that conversation. I already know where my clients are at. So I'm just going to say, well, send me a text first and I'll let you know if we need a call. And that's what I do with everybody. And 99 times out of 100, the question I can answer in 1 second. And they're like, "Oh, thank you." And I'm like, "Well, why would you call me for that?"
Yeah.
And
Because they wanted to wheel you in and try to persuade you to take, however much money less.
yeah. But I'm actually saving myself because
Mhm.
my personality is no one's, hoodwinking me. I'm tough and I'll come off as a jerk by being on the phone because I don't want to be on the phone. So I'm actually
Right.
saving my reputation by, creating these boundaries the way that I do my life. But most people really adjust to it. And when I have, listings where there's 10, 20 offers coming in, they're always very impressed with how much I'm feeding them out. They don't have to contact me. I'm telling them, "Hey, we have 6 offers. You're one of the 3 that's a maybe. I need to know by now," because I'm very transparent. And I think, transparent communication and documentation is important. And I don't ever want to be in a position where somebody says, "Well, you said this." And I say, "Well, I know I didn't say that." I just pull up the text. So hundreds of times in real estate, somebody claimed that I did something and I just send them a screenshot of the text and I never hear from them again. And that's why I
That's
do it.
amazing. And speaking of transparency, documentation, and being tough, tell us about being an attorney and what kind of law you practiced.
I was a prosecutor for 8 years in the state of Florida at the state level, not the federal level. And then I was a criminal defense attorney for 2 years. And I did a lot of trials. I did about 250 trials to verdict. I think I was known, my friends would say, as I will just go to trial because the honest truth at the time when I started is we had so many cases in Broward County. I was in Fort Lauderdale at the time. The only way that you can get your case slowed down is to just go to trial on everything. To just say you're going to go to trial on everything. Some the witnesses won't show up and they'll get, it'll get kicked. You can't run a docket through. So the judges really appreciated that it doesn't matter to me. Like if there was value in the case, I'm ready if they're ready. Most of the time, what happened is then people started to realize, oh, they really are going to go to trial. Let's plea.
Yeah.
I was tough at it, but I think I was fair.
And what skills do you think you took from that time? I mean, you talked about documentation and transparency, of course, but what do you think most applies to your current world now?
Oh, negotiation. I mean, it's an art and a science at the same time. Understanding where someone's pressure points in and when you can use it, and as an investor, I use it. I mean, people say that I do things as an investor that they would never do because they assume that it's mean. And I'm like, it's not mean. I'm an investor. I'm trying to make money. So when I'm making offers for myself, they have a timeline. You have a day to accept it. If not, it's going down 15,000. Don't ask me if it's going to go up because it's not going back up. And they always like to test me. But I mean, there's one thing that I will not go back on my word unless I made an error of some kind. So, I control it because I don't need it. And I think the reason why I'm good in real estate is because I have no emotional attachment to it and I don't need any of it. I don't even really want a lot of it. I'm looking at it, but there's so much real estate out there. It doesn't faze me to lose, and there's plenty of deals that I've lost that could have been great deals, but that's just part of the process.
Keeping your word, I think, is so crucial. Something I'm trying and partially failing to teach my 2.5-year-old daughter right now, that when I say one more song, it really means one more song. But anyway, I think
don't keep my word. Yeah, with my kids, forget about it. They can just
she is a master negotiator already,
Yeah,
and I'm kind of proud of her for that. But
I would call it a manipulator. Children are the best manipulators on earth.
I'm a publicist, so I'm being kind, right?
Yeah,
I'm giving
fair.
her the spin because she's my blood. But anyway,
Yeah.
what I think is so interesting about what you said, no emotional attachment, right? And, there is a firm deadline and we're not going back and forth. So much in real estate you hear right now is seller's market, or I just had a property that I offered on and it was on the market for 4 days and it had multiple offers. And I was very confident going in with my lowball offer because I was okay if it didn't get accepted. And I thought if it does get accepted, it's a great deal.
Yeah.
But what are the deals that you're looking at that you feel comfortable doing things like that? Like, are you looking at things that are less turnkey and therefore going to have a smaller pool? Or do you just know what you're doing so well that you're like, I'm fine if I lose it, because like you said, you don't really need anymore?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, if I'm going to look for a flip, which is really, really hard right now, because what happened is that your traditional home buyers who are so desperate are buying worse and worse condition properties. They're taking on renovations that they don't have any idea how much they cost, because 99% of realtors don't know anything about renovations. So they tell them, oh, it's probably 20,000. And I'm in there listening to them like, this is 100,000. You're going to lose all your money. Not my problem. I can't change that. So I look for properties now that have some type of anomaly that a regular home buyer will freak out about at inspection. That could be a structural issue. Could be maybe it needs a new septic system. We've done that. I know how much it costs. It could be something that looks outdated and a regular builder isn't going to do, because it's not a cookie cutter home. So I like ranches, mid-century modern houses, things that are more unique and have character. And I want to keep the character. And that's for myself. But, you talked about it. It's low inventory. People are desperate. So investors are being desperate. And that's why mortgage rates went up, and everyone said, oh, the prices are going to come down. No, prices are still going up because there's no inventory and everybody's just flat out desperate. And I'm never desperate. I just don't want a property that bad. There's a lot of properties that I've liked. Some I probably should have been more aggressive at, but I don't have any that I'm like, ooh, that was, the one that got away. It's, just part of the process.
I don't know if you listen to the podcast Smartless, but Jason
Yes.
Bateman once said something about casual indifference and this being the key to life. And I've seen this professionally, particularly, especially with like job offers and things like that, when you don't really care, somehow you are the like magnet attracting all of these things.
Yeah.
And when you're really emotionally invested in something, you really, really, really want it, it doesn't come through a lot of the time. And that's what I'm hearing you say with these properties. Like, you're really looking at it for what it is and what you could be. And you're like, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Well, I mean, I think that's part of my personal journey too. I mean, I think I generally have a casual indifference to life outside of my children and family. I mean, really, like, I live a really nice, boring life, but it's not boring to me.
Right.
Outside of my kids and my sister and my stepbrothers, and relatives, and some very close friends. I have lots of close friends from growing up. So I have like friends that I've been friends with 40 years. They're all important to me, but again, casual indifference is a great word. That's how I feel about almost everything. The majority of the times that I say yes to something, I wish I said no. So I just start saying no. And I'm not a people pleaser. I'm like the opposite of a people pleaser. So again, that affords me much more time to do the stuff that I want. And then when I say yes, people know that I'm going to be mentally available instead of saying yes to something that I already know I'm not going to enjoy.
I'm going to give you the publicist spin again, and I'm going to call that you have your priorities straight, not casual indifference.
Yeah, but the funny thing about me is I like the casual indifference better, because right. I don't want to spin myself, because that's who I really am. And I understand why people think indifference can sound rude. It's why some people think that I'm rude, or there's a difference between arrogance and confidence in terms of what you know and what you've studied. And if you put in 10,000 hours, you should be confident. It doesn't mean that you're arrogant, but I am indifferent to a lot of stuff. Or there may be stuff that I just don't want to talk about with a lot of people. Doesn't mean that I don't know about it. I see a 30-minute conversation coming, and I have a mental availability of 30 seconds.
Yeah. So how did you make the shift from being a trial lawyer, a criminal defense attorney, to a gallerist, a museum curator, and an educator?
My dad died, as we talked about. And it was funny, though, because I did ask my dad a lot of things, because my mom passed away when I was 20. So in those 13 years, I asked my dad everything, but it was all personal because I wasn't really thinking business. I was just so happy that he was still around. So I did much better with my dad, but when he passed away, I was still a criminal defense attorney, and I kept doing it because he liked it. He would watch me in trial, which is like, nothing can be ever cooler. My dad, who was scared of trial, would come watch me. Trials people think aren't open to the public. They are. And he would just come, and it would be him and five of my friends, just watching me do a murder trial or something. And that's just, you can't recreate that. So, after he passed away, I think I was lost. I was about to go through a divorce as well. And I was looking for something different. The divorce happened later, but with my ex-wife, we opened this, we bought a building. So it was real estate related in an artist colony in Sarasota called Toll's Court. We painted it this three colors. And it started off as a half boutique, half art gallery. And I just got obsessed with art and artists. And it became a thing that unleashed my own creativity, started writing again, started painting. It was terrible, but I loved it, and that unlocked what eventually, got me to where I am, because it was me running my own businesses. And that wasn't a profitable business for 6 years. I mean, I lost a lot of money, but boy, it was nice. Most of it was really aesthetically pleasing, which is what I think about houses. I'm very meticulous.
Is the painting behind you a Jonathan Greene original?
No, it's not. I do have one in the other room, but that's not. But that was a student when I was in Sarasota. I bought that from a student, for $500, and it's right behind me every day.
And so when you said educator, obviously I know a lot of the work that you do now is around real estate investing education, but were you also doing art education as well?
Yeah, when I was a museum curator during that time, they hired me to run this museum management program at Montclair State as kind of an adjunct faculty. And they ended up deciding to close the program. So for 3 years, I kind of ran the inside of that program. It was very limited. It was only maybe 20 students. But we had to graduate them out. And I ended up teaching a bunch of courses, business of art, art and law, and then created some courses to help them get a new world view on it. And teaching things like exhibition design was the first thing that I taught. But I think that helped me relate more one-to-one. And it definitely goes to kind of the real estate investing meetups that I do now, and a lot of the Zoom activity that we've done since the pandemic, just with other people and trying to coach and help them see the light at the end of the tunnel, which is what I think a lot of people are having trouble doing.
Are you still really involved in the art world now, or is it something that you just think about like personally and for your passion?
It covers my house, but I have no contact other than all my friends who are artists. I really don't look at art anymore. The art world is an odd beast. So I think I got burnt out on the I guess the non-transparency of it. It just wasn't, it was hard to do business. It's a lot of fake stuff. And if you compare art valuations to property valuations, in a lot of ways, it's similar. Art valuations, just random. And they're not, you can't really verify anything, but if you just look at some of the biggest art collectors, someone like Daniel Mugrabi, when he goes and he buys an Andy Warhol and he owns 200 Andy Warhols, he can intentionally overpay because it will increase his portfolio value of his other Warhols. So what I counsel a lot of people on is, if you're going to do anything, if you want to do short-term rentals, or if you want to do rental properties, you want to buy multiple in the same area so you can hedge your bets against each other. You can renovate one to the hilt, sell it, get a high appraisal value on that, and now your rental property for 3 years is going to have a better value, and then you can refinance that out at a higher rate if you're just doing all similar properties in the area. So it's the same principle. Real estate's just more verifiable, but still, it's kind of a runaway train.
That's so interesting, because I hadn't thought, I was thinking about the opposite perspective of, I right now have a short-term rental near Lake George and Bolton Landing, and I have one in Saratoga Springs, also about 40 minutes south in upstate New York. And part of me thinks, it'd be great to have another in one of those markets, but number one, I'm not going to be able to buy them as vacation properties. So I'm looking at least 20 to 25% down. But on the positive side, in terms of operations, I already have a cleaner. I already know that market. I already have all my recommendations. I know who comes there, etc. But part of me thought, what if something happens? Like, there's a documentary made on Netflix about a murder in some place, and all of a sudden no one wants to go there anymore. And I'm completely invested into one market. Shouldn't I be logistically and destination-wise diversified? But that's a really interesting point that you raised.
I think they're both good points. I'm always a diversified investor, but it doesn't mean I won't cluster some. I still invest in stocks. I have a lot of money in index funds because it's a good hedge against everything else. But I like to buy weird real estate like my dad also. I've had commercial properties, industrial, but now I look for a lot of Main Street mixed use because it mixes residential and retail, which I really like for kind of old Main Street vibe. But, operationally, it's significant. The way that I look at it is if you get really good at it and you have 3 or 4 in an area, and then you have, clients who are going to stay and they don't like one, you always have another opportunity to pivot to. But I think your observation on it is also valid. I think diversification is good. The coolest thing about real estate is that you can diversify it within its own asset. You can now, we talk a lot about short-term rentals and hospitality, but you can now buy, say, a 4-family in some area. You can long-term rent 2 of the units, short-term rent 1, mid-term rent the other, and you have 3 different types of income streams in one single property, which makes it a diversified asset in itself. And that gives you more scale and more options for what you can do. And worst case scenario, with real estate, you can always move into it because, you got your place in Lake George because that was going to be a place for you to go. But then you realize all these things are places to go. And when my sister and I were doing short-term rentals 20 years ago, they started as for houses that she lived in. And then she would buy another. And she was like, well, I can get renters here. We're in the Hamptons at the time. She's like, I can rent this. So she did that. Then she moved again and she rented that. And then she moved to Florida and then she moved and we rented that one out. I think that one we owned together. And then we did it in California. We bought a house for my stepmom. She didn't like it. She wanted something smaller, short-term rental. So we were doing this when it was just HomeAway and Vrbo and Airbnb didn't existed. So we got a lot of kind of hard lessons in what it was like to, I guess, super landlord, because we were used to long-term landlords. And now we were dealing with, with much less technology 20 years ago to be able to, you couldn't send videos and stuff in advance. We had printout cards of how to make everything work. And it was a more hands-on business at the time. If the barbecue didn't start, my sister's friend would have to go over and start it. And that happened a lot.
So talk a little bit about that fourplex diversified asset that you were just mentioning, because I think a lot of the listeners to this show come from hospitality. So a lot of the things that maybe real estate investors who are getting into the short-term rental space and lacking, how do we actually take care of our guests? Our listeners they've mastered that. They know that they think about the guest first. But the idea of actually investing in real estate might be a newer pursuit or interest to them. So if you can give us a bit of like the 101 on what you were talking about with that fourplex.
Yeah. So, traditionally someone would buy a fourplex and you just rent them all on long-term rent. But what if you
fourplex, we mean essentially a building that has 4 units within it, could be apartments to be rented to individual people.
Right. It's one, you buy it on a residential because it's under 5 units. So you're getting a residential loan. P.S. You can also do it for 3.5% down and house hack it and live in 1 unit and then rent the others, as we're going to talk about. So it gives you a lot of alternative options, more units. When you lose somebody moves out, you have less trouble because you have 3 cash flowing units or 2 if you're living in 1. But the opportunity's there. And, there are issues, though, from a hospitality point of view, because long-term renters don't always want a short-term renter underneath or a mid-term renter. So you have to be really cognizant of where you are. So if you own a fourplex and it's an area that's close to a train, like where I am in New Jersey, now I'm thinking, wait, New York has a short-term rental ban. This seems really ripe. I would probably do at least 2 of those in a short-term rental, which is what I recommend. But now with the kind of upswell of midterm rentals, that gives you a whole nother option where it's a different level of hospitality for midterm to short term. Short term can be in the fourplex, it wouldn't be amenities driven where you're going to have a putt-putt or a pickleball court, but you're going to have more wow features in a short-term rental and expect more turnover, and you're going to need a little bit more of a touch. For midterm rental, if you have that across the hall, that's going to be, 13 to 30 weeks probably. That's going to need to be more durable. They need more creature comforts. They don't need as many bells and whistles as short term, but this helps you diversify in there. So you can say, okay, I have my long-term rents are say $1,000 up top. So if I'm doing it on short term and you're in, and honestly, most areas can support a short term in almost anywhere, and almost every area can support midterm just because there's insurance and all these other things. So if you're doing it in this small box, now you're like, well, I'm making 2,200 on a short term, and the midterm making 1,600. So instead of 4,000, now I'm up a substantial amount. And then you can always say, oh, okay, the long-term renters, I don't like them as much. Or maybe you decide I don't like the hassle of short term, but it gives you a way to play around with one investment at scale without losing any income. And that's what I think is an interesting strategy. And if you talk about, especially you're talking about Lake George, I talk about the Catskills a lot in places like that, Hudson. There's a lot of 2, 3, 4 families there, which are live-in friendly, but also short-term, midterm friendly. And these are places where you can get a lot of weekenders. And to me, if I was buying a short-term rental now, I would just be buying any place that I want to use it. I'm not going to be overly into the data, although I think the data is important. But if you're not getting enjoyability out of it, it doesn't really make that much sense to me, unless it's really like a cash flow beast, because it's going to take up a lot of time. But if you're going to use, you might as well buy it in a place that you want to go, because then it's just free vacations. You don't have to pay to go somewhere. Why would you get a short-term rental in a place that you want to go and then book it and go stay in somebody else's? That doesn't make any sense.
Exact investing strategy. And it's because partially I'm a newbie investor. So I have my 2 short-term rentals and I have 1 long-term rental back in London.
Yeah.
And I don't have this huge portfolio. I don't have a ton of cash to be able to buy. So if I'm going to buy something, I want to make sure I can enjoy it as well. Yeah. And to go back to hospitality, if I'm a target market of who's going to be using the property, then I can cater to my guests better. But I want to go back to something you said. You talked about, being able to put 3.5% down. I don't think a lot of people realize that. I think the old myth of 20% circulates even for first-time primary home buyers. So as a real estate agent, what are some of the myths that you see newbie investors like myself come up with? And what's actually the truth behind it?
Well, I mean, more money down is better, especially in competitive environments. It's very hard to win with, especially if you're using an FHA at 3.5% down, if you have competition. So if you're going up against 14 other offers, and in my area, that means at least 6 will be cash, you're not going to win. And you have to bid substantially.
Why is it that more money down wins?
The seller security. In reality, it makes no difference. It's a perspective thing. So the way that I present it when I have people who want to use an FHA, we explain that this is an investor's loan. It's not a, quote, poor person's loan, which is how sellers look at it. Ludicrous. And we do the same with VA loans or fire police loans or doctor loans, where you can put 0% down, but you can show that you have money. So you can provide a proof of funds, which is the way to combat it. If you only have 3.5%, you only have 3.5%. You have to have enough for closing, but you still have to explain it to the other agent, because remember, again, 99% of agents know nothing about investing. They don't understand. They don't know a lot about anything, to be completely honest. But there's some are really good at their job, but they want to stay in a very tight box. So when you can help open up that idea, which is especially, hey, I want to get an investment property, I'm living in a condo. It's like, well, why don't you just live in the smallest unit of the 4 family and then rent the 3 bigger units? And then you're good, especially for people who travel. Just pick the 1 unit, stay in there, and just live there half the time. And then you can put way less money down. So it's not invalid to think that it's harder to win with less money down. That's definitely true, because we have a very low inventory. So you have a lot of competition. And again, most things are selling over asking. I'll just give you one example of one of my main markets, which is Montclair, New Jersey. Multiple properties in 2024 sold for $1 million over the list price. And people think, no, that's not possible. It's like, I'll just send you the data. It's very common. Some are priced too low. Some it's just insanity. So, I don't know that it's really a misconception, but there's a lot of different options on how to play with property the right way, and just kind of figure it out as you go. The best way is always to build up as much runway and cash and reserves as you can, and then be very careful. People love HELOCs because they've made so much money since the pandemic on their homes. But I still caution people, if you want to take a home equity loan, the max you would ever take would be 50% of the equity that you have, just so you have more runway. And you're really taking a second loan. It's not free money. Now you have 2 loans on your house, which isn't a great idea.
I think you really highlighted there the power of having a good real estate agent on your side and knowing the data and you being able to educate your clients on that. My real estate agent did exactly that for us when we were buying our property in Saratoga. And again, here I am, newbie investor. You just kind of have this myth of, well, you've got to go in under asking. Like, why would you go in at asking or God forbid, over asking, right? And in other markets where I've made offers unsuccessfully with maybe less accomplished agents, I remember touring a property and asking this other agent, what do you think this should go for? And she said, what it's listed at. And I'm like, you don't even know what it's listed at. You just don't want me to make a challenging offer here. But my agent, who I've bought both of my properties with, is fantastic. And for the Saratoga property, preemptively, she pulled comps for me and she showed me what the list price was and what they sold for, so that we didn't waste time with me making a lowball offer just because, I don't know, I think I should. I was educated and able to go in with something that actually the sellers accepted straight away on both counts.
Yeah, I mean, look, my dad was a lowball offerer, but he had a strategy. I'm the opposite. I never lowball. And if I'm sending what they perceive as a lowball, I back it up with literally a page of evidence how I came to that number. They may not want it, but they'll come back to it later, which is how I win a lot. So I present the data as well. And there are certain offers that I just won't write for people. If people are lowballing just to lowball, makes me look bad. So it's not going to happen for me. And some people think that I have to write their offer. I'm like, you just go write it with somebody else because there's no basis to make this offer. And even in my area, things can sit 60, 90 days and they still sell for more than list price because they're listed at under the value. So knowing the market, being able to show what the block values look like, and then for short-term rentals, anything like that, is just showing what else is available in the area, pulling reports. The thing about it is there's so much data available now, especially in the short-term rental world, that it's almost become commoditized, which is why hospitality has gone down. People are looking at these hospitality endeavors as investments, and then they're not taking as much to the client because they're looking at data. But if you go back to the way that I grew up, walking hundreds and hundreds of houses before I was 18, I have a feel for what's going to work. And I think everybody would need to develop that at the most. So if you're out there looking, you just want to look at as many houses as possible because those are reps to get to your 10,000, tipping point hours. And the more reps that you have, the better. So even if you say, hey, I want to invest in another state, I'd still be going to open houses every weekend because I want to get a feel for what basements look like and what I need to look for and where what electric boxes are going to be old versus new, because it's the only way that you're going to really know, or else you're only relying on an agent. And that's a tough thing to do because then later you'll be playing the blame game on somebody when most of the time it's the client's fault.
And you mentioned that many agents are not educated when it comes to investors. So what are some questions or maybe some red flags that people should look out for to know if they're working with the right agent or not?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're looking for a short term, because obviously that's a hospitality principle, or even like boutique hotels, that's another niche. I would want to be looking with someone who has investment properties. If not, it doesn't make too much sense for me. Can there be good agents who don't invest themselves? Sure. But why aren't they investing? Why doesn't every real estate agent have properties? You have the most access. You understand what they're worth. It's because they're not making enough money because the business is hard. But I want to be with someone who's an investor, but not the kind that's going to steal all the good deals from me if I'm a client. So a lot of clients have always asked me, because I'll look at a property first and I'll say, hey, do you want to look at this? If you want it, I'm not going to offer. But if you don't want it, I might offer. I'll always let them offer first, which goes back to there's no attachment for me. My job is to service the client there. So I always ask, do you have investment properties? How many other investors have you worked with? If you're doing a short-term rental, how many short-term rentals have you sold to people, and how are they doing right now? If they don't know, it means they're not even keeping in touch with them. So you're replaceable also. Right. And I read the reviews on Zillow. We talked a lot about it on my podcast with you about reading the reviews for short-term rentals, but Zillow, you can't fake the review. You have to be in there verified. They'll go through it. So those are valid, and you can look and see what types of properties they are just by looking at the pictures. And I read the bios, and then I do my research and see. And I think you also have to trust your gut on the vibe. The best way is a referral from somebody else or a referral from an agent, that knows people all over the country. But you still have to have that trust. If you meet an agent and you're not like kind of, ooh, I really like them, don't work with them. It's not going to work. You really, the between an agent and a buyer or seller is a partnership. And that's the best way that everybody leaves that transaction happy is because you're all always transparent and on the same page.
That's so interesting. I would have thought if I love them, that's a good sign. But you're right. There is that level of like a relationship, a business here, that it's not just, are you someone I want to grab a drink with? It's, are you competent?
Biggest transaction of your life sometimes. So using, your cousin Susie doesn't always work. And that's part of our pitch when they say, oh, my cousin has a license. It's like, okay, well, does he know how to run the data? Does he know all the agents in the area?
Yeah.
The longer that you're in real estate, the more you realize everything's just a relationship business. So if I'm putting in an offer and I know the listing agent, we've done 3 transactions together and they know I'm a closer and I always do what I say and my clients listen to me. And then the other agent is new, exact same offer, but they didn't even send it in right. They didn't have a good presentation. They clearly don't know what they're doing. I'm going to win. And I'm probably going to win if my offer's lower in that context, because what does a seller really want? They want a closer. And I think that's what people are really looking for. And that's where, again, negotiation, dialogue, and building relationships over time, closers win. I mean, in commercial real estate, it's only closers win. No new person is buying a 100-unit apartment building. They're not even getting a sniff at that, unless it's the worst deal ever. And they're like, oh, we're getting rid of this one. The big deals you only do on relationships. And again, that's a hospitality principle that you have to think about when you're going into short-term rentals. Are you buying this for investment? That's fine. You want to run a business, but the business is the people. If you don't focus on the people first, you're going to make less money and probably be out of business before, because it's just not going to work any other way with what everybody else is doing better than you.
Speaking of people, Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing is your 4th podcast, I understand, which is not surprising given how many careers you've held. What made you start the podcast? What made you name the podcast that? And what has been like the most exciting and the worst part of starting it?
I think, well, as you know, podcasts are a lot harder than people think. People think they're easy because there's like a trillion podcasts out there. Like everybody, I probably have an aunt's cousin, third, 7-year-old who has a grandmother who has a podcast right now. It's possible. I started it because I tested, my first podcast was called Dad. It was about fatherhood and it was really an homage to my dad. And I was listening to a lot of podcasts then, Tim Ferriss, Rich Roll, trying to get an idea of what good interviewers do. And I liked doing that. I couldn't book guests. I didn't really understand the outreach. I was busy. And then I had a creative podcast called Assemblage, which was for creatives when I was writing a lot. And these were tester podcasts. And then I created this podcast because I knew it was time. I had been thinking about it for a long time. I've been involved in the investing world for so long. I had been, somewhat known in the industry. And I just thought, I just want to talk to investors and get the word out there. And I had been on a few podcasts as an investor and I was really bored. So I thought, I think I can do a better job at getting out there. And I'd gone through my own journey of mindfulness. About halfway through my agent career, I just quit for a year because I wanted to just focus on my kids and focus on myself and self-awareness and learn things. And so all I did that year was get my life coach certification. I did those other podcasts, wrote a ton, and went inward. And that's where the mindfulness part came, which eventually became, Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing, which is about the mindful approach, which is, again, it's a more transparent, honest approach. A lot of people don't like what I have to say, but it's not because what I'm saying is wrong or rude. It's just because a lot of people, when they're starting to get into investing, they only want to hear what they want to hear. They want an echo chamber, which will lift them up. I can do whatever I want. And that's not safe investing to me. So I'm here to protect people. And I think that the way that I do the interviews, as you know, since we just did it this morning, we're recording doubles on the same day, is really just for me to focus on what their expertise is and make sure that the audience is on board with me. But what better way can I spend an hour just talking about real estate? I just love it.
So you really thought, let me start this out of like curiosity of having conversations as opposed to like, maybe this will generate inbound leads for my agent business.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I honestly didn't think that. I mean, I don't care about leads. I reject more business than I take.
You
With this,
casually indifferent?
exactly.
No.
It's the casual indifference. I'm gonna put this on my Instagram profile today. Um, no, I like interviewing people and I like talking about real estate investing. And I really, honestly, 100% truly thought that I could help a lot of people because I listen to so many podcasts. Again, like if I'm listening to like a Rich Roll episode or someone on Tim Ferriss, and I'm like, oh my gosh, or Andrew Huberman, like that's a nugget that I'm going to remember for the rest of my life. So the thought that, you and I could be talking, me and somebody else could be talking, and somebody in the middle of America or in another country could be driving their car or at the gym and just listening on headphones to one thing, and they could hear just one tidbit from me or from someone else that will change the entire trajectory of their life. That's unbelievable. And that's why podcasting is so cool. And I try to do the best job that I can and find the best guests. But the opportunity that you would affect someone's life and never know about it, that's awesome. If you know about it, even better. But again, that's not why I do it. I just like it. We are trying to figure out how it can, monetize itself because it's now just independent, which is why, we grow slower. I've done it all myself because I like control as well.
Yeah. And from all of the guests that you've spoken to, as well as your current role as an agent, do you have any predictions for the future of real estate? Big question. And no, I'm not asking about mortgage rates because they're probably just going to keep going up as are prices.
Yeah, I do. It's something I've been talking about a lot lately. So I think that home ownership is changing a lot. I don't think that because of the affordability of homes, I think that a lot of people who are high income earners at younger ages are going to be choice renters, which means they're going to opt to rent because what you can get for your rental payment is way better than what you can get for your housing payment on a mortgage for a similar property, similar payment. So I think they're going to be choice renters with disposable income, and they're going to start to look for other things. I think people are going to be investing before they own a lot of the time, buying a turnkey in the Midwest, doing a short-term rental in a town that they used to go to, going into a syndication, which I invest in now, which is a more passive investment. I think these are going to be the way that people are going to adjust. So as much as you see a lot of the younger people complaining about, homes and housing, you can still buy real estate, make money on real estate, make it that, as we were saying, that part side hustle, and you can still be a choice renter and enjoy yourself in an area that you want to live without overpaying for something. And I think that's really going to be what we're going to see a lot. And I think it's okay. I think, I can only control what I can control. So when things happen, it's just for me to try to figure out, well, how's where's the adjustment going to be made? How are people going to pivot? And how can I, using the mindfulness techniques, try to help people understand that, it's not always the same way. There's always another way. Real estate is a great asset. It's liquid. You can basically sell anything that you own at any time. Maybe it's not for the price you bought it for if you bought too high, but you can get rid of it. Someone's going to buy it. So it's another way to diversify your life. But that's what I really see on the horizon that I don't think enough people are talking about it. Choice renters who want to invest first, and maybe they're investing a farm, maybe they're just investing in a smaller condo in an area, because buying a home just isn't going to make sense for them right now.
And can you clarify what you mean by syndication?
Yeah, syndication is basically a group of people investing together run by a general partner. If I'm investing in it and I'm a limited partner, I give them X amount of money. A lot of syndications are for investors that have qualified to a certain amount. So you could need a lot more to get into those, usually about $50,000. But it's basically the most passive investing out there. So I am invested in 3 syndications. They're all multifamily syndications. I don't have to do anything. One's in Chicago, one's in Dallas, one's in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm betting on the operators to know that they're going to be able to do, either upgrades or turnover, or they're buying at a good price and they have a good debt on it. And then over time, you can either, if you're doing something that's just a turnover, which means you're going to get active income right away. So say I put in 100,000, I'm getting a feedback every month, I'm getting money. And then that's eventually going to sell in 3 to 5 years. And a lot of times you're going to get a very good multiple on that. It's just that when you invest in syndication, it's not liquid. You're not getting your money out. You can't call a week later and say, hey, can I take 25,000 out? No, your money is locked in. You're buying into the process. And it's just another way to do something where I don't like multifamily because I don't like being a landlord, but now I can be involved in multifamily. I don't have to do anything. I've done all my vetting by knowing the operators of the fund. I've gone through the due diligence on the asset, and it gives me a way to, bring returns in and feel like I'm a part of something again, while sticking with my time freedom, which is I don't want to manage that stuff.
Right. Well, Jonathan, we're going to move into the final 3 questions that I ask everyone. So tell me, what was the best hospitality experience you've ever had?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I'm a top customer, I would say.
No.
Yeah, I know. Shocking. It's funny. So I went to Japan about 12, 15 years ago. And in Tokyo, I stayed in the Mandarin Oriental. Everyone just assumed that's amazing, like best experience ever. I did like it. I did like it. But again, we've talked a lot. I'm an introvert. So I went to Kyoto and we stayed in a ryokan, which is your traditional kind of home. That was it for me. It was very low key. They did come in, turn everything down, but no one was talking. It wasn't like a bunch. It was just like a very seamless, calm experience. And I think those are my favorite. I've only I don't stay in hotels. I've stayed in short-term rentals for, again, like since I was a kid. So my best experiences are always clean. All the information is there and no one bothering me unless I need something.
Well, I think it's going to be very clear the answer for what was your worst hospitality experience. It's going to be dirty. There's going to be missing information. People are going to be talking your ear off.
Yeah, I've had a few of them, but my sister and I, we did a lot. We rent short-term rentals a lot together, and then sometimes my brother will come. We all stay in like a big one. So you get really nice places when you're paying a lot, but per person and per family, it's not a lot. But yeah, we showed up at one in LA before the STR kind of ban in LA, the 30-day stay, and it just was like the most bait and switch I've ever seen. It looked way worse, but there was a back porch and there was stuff like construction stuff everywhere. All the rooms were disgusting. We opened the door and we're like, nope. Immediately canceled the reservation, disputed everything. And then we stayed at kind of a suite hotel in LA, which we had stayed at before when a similar blunder happened. But yeah, the bait and switch is just the worst in the hospitality business. That people, I don't know how I don't know how other people didn't say something.
Right.
Like, how is this possible?
And final question for you. What does hospitality mean to you? And is there a person, brand that you think has truly mastered it?
Well, I read Danny Meyer's book and that was amazing. And that was a real, unbelievable breakdown, especially in an industry that's so difficult, restaurants. So hospitality to me is making sure that the customer is always at the front of your mind and making sure that their experience is not just okay and not just great, but more than they expected, and thinking ahead of them. If I'm thinking of short-term rentals now, I would want to know what every person was going to ask in advance so I could prove to them that I'm out ahead of them. So hospitality is really that: client first, profit second. Because I think if you're focused solely on making the experience better for the client in any type of hospitality business, your rewards are going to come. Maybe they come a little bit slower because you're not putting out the shiny objects as fast or over-promising and under delivering, which is the classic to non-hospitality. But I think that's really the key. And again, I would say that I learned it from my dad because I knew my tenants when I was 7 years old, 8 years old. I knew that he would go and collect the rent and I would be there and he would know things about them. And then when I came home in the summers, he would say, well, they're 6 months behind. I'm like, oh, well, kick them out. He's like, why would I kick them out? They're nice. They've stayed there for 5 years. They're the caretaker. Sometimes people go through a hard time. And to me, that's really the idea of hospitality was ingrained in me. To him, it's, person first, profit second.
What a beautiful story and such a powerful lesson to learn at such a young age. I can't thank you enough for being here today and for demystifying the shiny and intimidating world of real estate for us.
I appreciate it, Katie. Thanks so much for having me on.
All right, everyone. It's time for today's sweet summary, where I break down the key insights and actionable takeaways from today's conversation. Real estate is one of my true passions, and I loved having Jonathan on the show to educate, demystify, and inspire me more about this meaty topic. Early in the episode, he said, real estate is a long game. Don't look for the quick hacks or the tricks to do it. What a refreshing reminder in our Instagram-centric world where, quote, influencers are touting the next get-rich-quick scheme around every corner. He shared a lot of learnings from his time as a trial lawyer, the art of negotiation, the power of structure, and that everything should be documented. And we also talked about the pursuit of time freedom and how time blocking can be an effective strategy to get us there. As a reminder, he suggested putting everything on a Google Calendar, starting with number 1, all scheduled events like school closures or teacher meetings. Number 2, recurring appointments like therapy or frequent pursuits like going to the gym. Before we started recording, he told me that he even puts shower on his calendar, which truthfully, so do I on especially busy days. And number 3, the aspirational bits, the goals that you want to achieve every day. Now, whether or not we're up to his color coding level, what I liked most about his methodical approach is what he said the output was, not letting anyone take away his time. Overall, Jonathan personifies someone who knows himself super well. He's followed his passions into multiple career paths, but always knows when it's time to move on. He knows he's an introvert, and he structures his life accordingly. He sets boundaries unapologetically that allow him to operate most effectively and efficiently, like deciding not to answer any unscheduled phone calls. His refreshingly no-nonsense approach is a great reminder that success isn't just about what we accomplish, but also what we protect. And that concludes another episode of Sweet Success. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, rate, and review the show. We all know how important those 5-star reviews are. I also want to say a massive thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in. It means the absolute world to me. And I'd love to hear from you. If you have ideas for future guests, new topics to cover, or even just want to say hi, don't be shy. Message me through our website, sweetsuccesspodcast.com, or on social media @sweetsuccesspodcast. That's sweet like hotel suite. Once again, I'm your host, Katie Cline, and I'm super excited to see you all next week.